Hello and welcome to NPC, that stands for Next Portable Console. It's the show about the games we take with us, and it's the hotties. And by that I don't mean the three of us. I mean it's the Handheld of the Year episode.
Why can't it be both?
It can be both, and we're joined by hottie number one, Mr. Brendon Brigley. Hello.
Hey everybody, so glad to be here yet again for the hotties.
It's another year, and we're also joined by hottie number two, Mr. John Voorhees.
It's great to be here, hottie number 3.
Thank you. So we started this. The first time you do it, it's not a tradition. The second time you do it, it's a tradition. You can say that it's an annual tradition at this point.
Yes.
We picked our handles of the year last year. It was the first year that we were doing the podcast together. And now we are in our second year, and we thought we would switch things up a little. Also because it's been a strange year for handhelds.
It has.
Last year we did categories. I don't think we're gonna do categories this year. We were
It doesn't make sense to do categories this year. You know what I was thinking about specifically? Like, it's worth mentioning about this show. The three of us are buying these handhelds with our own money. Like, we're not being sent them by anybody.
Yes.
So it does actually, like, a handheld actually has to be like interesting for us to go out of our way to pick it up and add it to our collection.
And when there are multiple $2,000 handhelds, it's just not going to happen.
I was gonna say that one of the trends, and maybe we can talk about trends at the end. We'll see. But one of the trends that we saw this year was like there were a lot of new and interesting handhelds that came out, and they were all really expensive. And so when you don't get sent those handhelds for review consideration, we gotta make really conscious decisions about the stuff that we buy.
Yes.
And so on the flip side, that also means that when you do get a recommendation from us, what do they say on YouTube? It's my honest review. Is that the thing?
It is.
Yeah. Honest review. Yeah.
Yes, this is a honest podcast episode about the handhelds of the year.
Oh my god, that's like one of my biggest pet peeves on YouTube.
I know.
It drives me up a wall.
That's why I mentioned
Could the hotties be the honest review of the year? Could that be what it is now? Can we
Honesty of the year. Yeah.
So before we get into that, let's see some ground rules. Okay.
Okay.
No knives.
Okay. No knives. All right. Cool. That's technically a handheld, but okay. No, I wanted to chat with you guys about this. Are we considering just releases of 2025? So handhelds that were released in 2025, or also from years prior?
Personally, I think we can go a little bit into 2024, like things that were released near the end of the year that we didn't have enough time to really absorb. I think
that's why I mentioned
we're all thinking of the same handheld. Yeah, there's one in particular that came out at the end of last year. I think I was the only one who had one by the time we recorded Hotties last year.
I think so. Yes, I think so.
Also, it is worth we do a thing on Into the Aether called the Go Toys, which is our games of the other year, which is just like games that we really loved that would have made a list if it included games that came out not in the year that we're recording the episode. We could introduce HOTOYs if you wanted to.
Yes, we could do HOTOYs. I like it, and I think
I sure do have at least one or two.
We are in a similar predicament this year as well, because as I'm looking at our document, Brendon is the only one that has a specific technically handheld that neither John nor I have, because it still hasn't shipped, and you know what I'm talking about, and we'll get to that later. Okay, we're gonna round robin this. We're gonna take turns. We're gonna have I think we said we're gonna have a personal top 3, and then we'll try our best to settle on a handle of the year for the entire show. That sort of collectively represents whatever it is you get when you combine the three of us.
Beautiful.
Brendon, you go first.
Okay, hottie number 1. All right, the bronze medal for me, the number 3 slot. Goes to, if you can believe it, the Miu Flip. The Miu Flip is a handheld that when it was released, I straight up didn't like. I wrote and then also filmed a pretty scathing review of it, specifically outlining it, or I guess like nailing it as indicative of, I think, one of the biggest issues with the scene in particular, which is a lot of manufacturers shipping devices with terrible software and expecting the community to fix it.
Yeah.
Specifically, I think that was indicated with this device by them shipping it only to the people who make custom firmware, like a couple months before it came out, being like, okay, here's the hardware. See if you can get something out by the time it comes out.
Please fix it for us.
Yeah. That rubbed me the wrong way. And then simultaneously, when the device actually came out, it was riddled with hinge issues. Basically, it just seemed like a coin flip if your hinge was going to break or not. I've seen some people say that it breaking is inevitable. I don't know if that's true, but I do know that I have 2 of them, and neither of the hinges have broken.
Yeah, and you've used them a lot too, right? I mean, you've taken with you a lot.
That's why this made its way to the number 3 slot. That's why this is on my list at all, is because for most of the year, and even still, the Miyoo Flip is the device that comes with me almost every single day. I've had a pretty huge turnaround on it. Specifically, installing MinUI on it was huge. As soon as I threw that on there, it really kind of all clicked into place for me. And I just think this form factor is kind of exactly the size I want. It's almost exactly the same size as the Game Boy Advance SP, but is just a little bit sturdier. And, it has sticks in case you want to use sticks. I almost never use them. But as a device specifically for playing kind of like low-powered retro stuff, it is my everyday carry. It comes with me everywhere. If I go on a trip, if I leave the house at all, it's really easy to fit into a pocket. It's about as good as it gets for like a true everyday carry handheld for me personally. So yeah, I will say the Miyoo Mini Flip did not make my top 3.
I was going to ask about that because it's obviously very much like the Miyoo Flip, but a lot tinier.
It is a lot tinier, and in my opinion, so tiny that I don't enjoy using it. I find it more difficult to use for long periods of time. Like my hand cramps up a lot faster when I start playing stuff on it.
Yeah.
Even on like a short subway ride, like if I'm like going 20 minutes north of here, I'm like I don't want to be playing the Miyoo Mini Flip for that long.
Wow.
Which is a bummer, honestly, because it's on paper both of them should be like the perfect Miyoo handhelds, but both of them have slight drawbacks that I think prevent them.
I could see it being good for like Pokemon games, for instance, where you're not like button mashing.
Yeah, you can play a lot of stuff one-handed on this, which is pretty cool. Like the fact that I could just sit here and very easily like move around and then press A to interact with stuff if I'm playing a Pokemon game or something that's turn-based like that. Really nice. But outside of that, it is not a device that I personally find myself using. It did not pull me away from the slightly larger Miyoo Flip.
Got it.
That's my number 3.
John, okay. John, what is your number 3?
All right. I'm going with the Trim UI brick. Okay. Now, this is for me the cheaper retro handheld that's for lower powered games that has stuck, that where a lot of the ones that I tried, including last year, just didn't stick the same way. And I think it's because unlike a lot of the other ones that we've tried over the last year and a half, it's the finish of it is a lot better. It's a lot better built. It feels more sturdy in the hand. The screen, I think, is among the most excellent of all the ones that we've tried in terms of retro handhelds. Very bright, very crisp, great colors. It's got that nice metal backplate on it that makes it also feel kind of sturdy as well. And, if it were... Part of me wishes it were a clamshell, because then I would feel like, more, I would feel better about taking it with me, right? But at the same time, I think that aspect ratio of the Trim UI brick also just lends itself super well to that whole class of games, whether it's NES or Game Boy Advance, SNES, all that. That's where I play those games. I play them on the Trim UI brick still to this day. I mean, it's a really nicely done device that, it does a better job out of the box with the UI too, even though you can obviously put on custom firmware too if you want.
Yeah. Man, you really got me thinking about a clamshell version of this thing. The Trim UI clamp. If that ever happened. Oh my God, I'd be all over it.
I'm tempted to get the hammer. I'm tempted to get the hammer, which is all metal. I don't know if it would add a lot to it, but other than weight, but it certainly would be probably last
A
little bit
nicer
longer.
object. Even.
Yeah, exactly.
Now that I've turned this into an iPod adjacent thing, I've also been thinking about getting the hammer specifically because I just think like form factor wise and aesthetically that would be very cool.
They have some really nice colors with the metal ones too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that gives me the perfect segue in that the Trim UI brick is also my number 3.
Ah, nice.
And I've also been thinking about getting the hammer, the all metal version. I love the brick, and when we recorded last year's episode, I didn't have mine. It has become my go-to handheld for mostly SNES and Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance games. The fact that it's shaped like a tiny Game Boy obviously helps. But
Sure.
that handheld, it screams retro. Like you don't want to, obviously, you couldn't, but you don't want to play PSP games or, PS1 games on a Trim UI brick. You want to play those kinds of games. At least that's from my perspective. It's perfect for ROM hacks. If you want to play Pokemon Lazarus, for example, or Emerald Sea Glass, like it's perfect for that. I've been doing my Chrono Trigger playthrough once again on the Trim UI brick.
Nice.
It's a modern Game Boy for me, and it's so pocketable and so elegant in the white finish, which is why I've been thinking about getting the metal version, just because I love this thing so much. If I can make it feel, sure, it's gonna be heavier, but if I can make it feel even just a little bit nicer and more premium, I think it's the kind of object, like physically speaking, as an object that I would be proud to leave on my desk because it's a beautiful piece of gear from my perspective. So yeah.
Yeah, it's not as premium as something like the Analog Pocket. On the other hand, I prefer it because it's smaller.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And also about $200 cheaper.
That too. That helps.
Yep. So we have our bronze picks. Brendon, you're up again. Silver.
All right. My number 2 handheld of the year, fittingly, is the Nintendo Switch 2. The Nintendo Switch 2, I think, is a device that a lot of people obviously had their eye on this year. We said at the end of last year that it was probably going to be the most important handheld that came out this year. I think that's probably true in the larger sense outside of the handheld community, quote unquote.
Right.
But the Nintendo Switch 2, I think in a lot of ways has had one of the stronger launch years of a mainline console release in a long time. I think at first it was a little bit iffy. It was a little bit touch and go, especially on the first party side because it was just launching with Mario Kart World and the Welcome Tour. But after getting Bonanza and even Metroid Prime 4, which I'm iffy on, I know you're not, Federico. I heard your Game of the Year episode.
Yeah.
Even being iffy on that, it still ended up being a pretty strong year for Nintendo. And I think specifically the thing that has really blown me away about the Switch 2 is not only the third-party support, because that was kind of a given, in terms of how much third-party support there was for the Nintendo Switch 1.
Yeah.
But more specifically, what developers have managed to pull out of the Switch 2 in terms of performance. I think, launching with Cyberpunk was their Skyrim moment for this console. And obviously Cyberpunk runs surprisingly well on this thing, but some of the more recent ports, like Star Wars Outlaws, Assassin's Creed Shadows, really, really, really impressive. And I think as a baseline for what this thing is capable of, considering this is again the most obfuscated will ever be in terms of the developer and hardware relationship. It will only get better from here, and I'm really excited to see what developers start to pull out of this thing from a performance perspective down the line. On top of that, I just think the hardware is really beautiful. I have my gripes about how big it is, but even still, it is a really great looking device. I think ergonomically, it leaves a lot to be desired, which I've also talked a lot about in terms of, we've all explored different grips and things for the Switch 2. I'm looking forward to that new cracked Nitro deck that's coming out next year. But I think the thing that really, honestly, endears me to the Switch 2 more than anything, which is so dumb, is the double USB-C ports. It's the one that's on top.
No, it's not dumb.
I agree with you. I mean, it's
it's awesome.
Something about that feels so considered and such like a nice to have feature. It just feels like a little gift from Nintendo. It's like a little joyful gift that they've given us to be able to also plug in a USB-C port from the top. I still believe there's a official peripheral that's going to come out that's going to make use of that in a real way that has yet to be revealed. But for now, just as a way to plug the thing in when I'm like lying on my side in bed holding a Joy-Con in each hand, and I can just plug it in and I have it on my bedside table. Amazing.
Really I still think it's going to be a camera that looks right up your nose as you're holding the Switch 2.
No, it's going to be a screen for DS emulation, I'm telling you. Make a screen.
Maybe.
Or a clamp that you can put on. You can turn the whole thing sideways. Yes. And then you have the top and bottom screen that way.
Possibly.
Switch 2, number 2.
Number 2 for me is also the Switch 2. It is the Switch 2. I agree with everything Brendon said. I think having spent a lot of time this year trying to get things like Cyberpunk running on a like $3,500 MacBook Pro laptop, I am floored by how well the Switch 2 can handle a game like that, because even an expensive laptop like that has struggles with it in terms of both the fan noise, the heat, and the battery life. So that is amazing. For me, it's all tied up in the first party games too. I love the games. I think that Nintendo did an excellent job of taking what already worked and just pushing it a little bit further and doing more with what they had, what they had to do to be able to kind of compete with current generation games. And that really comes down to the chipset in it. It comes down to the fact that you can play 4K on your TV. It comes down to things like the second USB-C port. There's just enough things that are different about this compared to the last generation model that make it fantastic. And yeah, I've got the same gripes that Brendon has. I think it's a little too big. I think it's uncomfortable to hold for long periods of time. But, you know, the ergonomics are taken care of. You'll find a grip, you know, and you won't have to spend a ton of money on it to make it more comfortable. So I'm not too concerned about that. And it really plays really well on a TV. So yeah, it's my number 2. I will note that it got off to a great start. I just read that Sony's PlayStation beat it out in November in terms of sales. Now, I suspect that's because Sony really blitzed the black market and the Black Friday deals both end of last month, and they're still running significant deals, which essentially roll back the price increase is about all it does. It takes off about $100. But I assume that that's really what's going on with Sony, and that it's going to flip again probably in January, I would think.
I think we're also going to talk about this a little bit later, but there are rumors that the Nintendo Switch 2 might also increase in price going into next year as well. And I think with the increase in RAM price, it's probably
a good bet.
Doesn't happen. But that article that you're referencing, John, I think it's also worth mentioning. It was the worst year for console sales since I think 1995.
That's a long time.
Pretty wild. I think that indicates a pretty big shift. If I were to read the tea leaves a little bit.
I'm very torn for my number 2 pick, because I thought I was gonna pick something, but then I looked deep inside my heart, and I know that it wouldn't be right. My number 2 handheld of the year is the Aeon Thor.
It's a good handheld.
It's a great
I've
handheld,
heard of it. Yeah.
And yes, and I think we ended last year saying, "Oh, we believe that 2025 is going to be the year that manufacturers will figure out clamshell handhelds, especially for DS and 3DS emulation." And we've seen them, and I think of all the ones that we've seen, the best one that strikes the balance of price, performance, design, durability is the Aeon Thor. Based on the same chipset as last year's winner of the HOTYs, the Aeon Odin 2. I forget, is the Thor 8 Gen 2 or 8 Gen 3? It's 8 Gen 2.
It's 8 Gen 2. Yeah.
It's Gen 2,
Yeah.
Same chipset. 2 stunning displays running Android. The top screen looks incredible. And everything about... See, the thing about the Aeon Thor is that they managed to turn what could have been a messy product, right? Android isn't really meant to be running on two screens simultaneously.
Right.
Then you have the hinge, you have the moving pieces, you have the feel of the buttons, you have the ergonomics of the console, you have something that is bottom heavy, and you risk of making it too flimsy at the top. But they managed to make a really well balanced, good looking, durable, it seems like so far, product. And having to wrestle Android, and we're now seeing more and more front-end launchers for Android truly optimized for two screens at the same time. I just feel like the performance that you get with this handheld, we talked about it a bunch on NPC when it comes to Windows emulation, right? Using Game Hub or Game Native. It has been for me a mini Steam Deck of sorts this year. And that's not to mention, the excellent streaming performance that you get when you combine it with a local PC or with a streaming service like NVIDIA GeForce Now, especially because the top screen looks amazing, really, really beautiful, well-calibrated AMOLED display. And the bottom one has been surprisingly useful, not just for DS and 3DS emulation, but to keep stats running on the bottom screen, or just to multitask if you want. You need to log into some web services while you can open one password for Android on the bottom screen. So overall, I feel like they managed to make my dream clamshell device running Android this year. And it's not my number one for reasons that I will explain later, but it's definitely one of my. I think I would say it's my favorite thing that AN has made so far.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, me too.
Well,
yeah. Okay, so I agree with it so much so that the AYN Thor is my number one of the year. All you need Thor. I mean, I agree with everything you just said. I think the thing about the Thor that really strikes me as the greatest success of it is it starts to raise questions in my head. There are ideas percolating about when people ask me if they should buy a 3DS or a Nintendo DS because they want to revisit those old games. I now have to choose between pointing them in the direction of eBay, getting a refurbished unit, or just getting the Thor, which I think is maybe the greatest success you could have imagined for this device. The idea of these manufacturers getting into the idea of making dual screen handhelds, as you put, Federico, I think is that's a tall order. There's a lot that can go wrong there between hinges, between screens, and just the software itself. There's so many things that can go wrong. For this thing to come out and be basically solid from launch. There were a couple issues here and there that got fixed basically immediately.
Within a week or two, yeah.
Yeah, I mean this thing is about as solid as it gets. But for me to start to question, do I play this game on original hardware going forward or do I play it on the Thor, I think speaks to its successes immediately. And the 3DS and the Nintendo DS experience on this thing is just remarkable. I mean, I have a stylus that I use with it, and I have found personally, the one drawback that I think a lot of people point to with this thing is the input latency, specifically with touchscreen games like on the Nintendo DS. I find that I got used to that latency pretty much immediately. Every time I sit down to play a game on here, it takes maybe 30 seconds for me to adapt to that.
Right.
But I think just to take it a step further, it is the multitasking aspect where the Thor really starts to shine beyond what I had even envisioned, because I always assumed that was a thing that I would never interact with. I never thought I would brush up against the multitasking of it all. But now that I can have a game like Pokemon Lazarus on the top screen and be also watching a YouTube video on the bottom, so if I'm just grinding, for levels or something before I go fight a gym leader, I could also be watching an interview with somebody or listening to a podcast or something like that, is amazing. And some of the other experiences I've had in terms of I'm going to stream this game from my PC to here with Moonlight on the top screen, and on the bottom screen, I'm going to bring up a map or I'm going to bring up a walkthrough for the game that I'm playing.
Right.
That's all stuff that I was like, that's fun that you can do it, but I would never do that. And now I find myself doing it all the time. I think it's worth mentioning that the Thor is the device that's next to my bed at all times, which is like the most coveted spot in the house in terms of my handheld. But it rarely leaves there unless I'm also going away. My one drawback with the Thor is I don't find myself bringing it on short trips at all, the same way I do with the Miyu Flip. But at the end of the day, that really just means that there's different devices for different scenarios.
Right.
But I think at the end of the day, the Thor is the dream device, as Federico said, for dual screen emulation. It's, I think, what AYN has been working towards this whole time. It's an Odin 2 in all but name, basically.
Yeah.
And the idea of getting an Odin 2 in the Vita form factor felt like, the dream come true, and now it turns out it's really the Thor. It's gonna be hard to top this device, I think. And when you talk to other people in the community who have one, I think they all kind of feel the same way about it. I remember I ran into Bob Wolf from Wolf Den at New York Comic Con this year. It was like the week that this came out and was getting into people's hands. And I remember we were just like remarking to one another how wild it is that every time AYN releases a device like this, it immediately feels like a sea change for everyone who is interested in handhelds. And I just like, it feels like endgame adjacent to me. I think that's the thing that really strikes me about it is I don't know what I would replace this with.
I think you'd replace it with a Thor that has the Snapdragon Elite.
Yeah,
maybe.
Right. I mean,
if there's more driver support on the Elite,
that's kind of what I've been thinking about, because my number one is also the Ant Thor. I really struggle to decide whether this top spot was going to be the Switch 2 or the Ant Thor. But I think the thing about the Thor for me is the versatility of it, the flexibility, the fact that I can do that emulation of DS and 3DS games. And it looks so good on those OLED screens, up-res from like the native resolution. But I can also stream, like Brendon said, from Moonlight, or I can use GeForce Now. I can play Android games if I want, and that second screen is incredibly handy. You're not flipping back and forth between apps to get passwords, log into things. You can, reference walkthroughs. You can do what Brendon was doing and, listen to podcasts. It's just a lot you can do. And I think it is pretty remarkable that Anne came out with a device that was able to coordinate those screens so well. It's not so easy. We saw that, Anbernick stumbled with this. And, one of those screens is considered an external monitor, essentially, for the phone. And to make that work in a way that feels as though it's one unit and not as if there's a screen tacked on, like the accessory that Retroid built, is pretty remarkable. I think they did a really good job right out of the gate with that. So, yeah, for all the reasons that you could do all these different things with the Thor, it's my game of it's my HOTY, my handheld of the year.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah,
my handheld of the year is the Nintendo Switch 2.
Yeah, baby.
The Nintendo Switch 1 held a special place in my heart. It was it became the console that I played the most in my life. That's because of the pandemic and the 800 plus hours that I put into Pokemon Sword.
Yeah.
Because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so I was really looking forward to a follow-up to the Nintendo Switch, and in some ways Nintendo delivered on what I was expecting, and in other ways they still haven't. Obviously, I and many others, I think, we were secretly hoping that there would be something weird about the Nintendo Switch 2, right? If you recall our conversations leading up to the announcement, like, oh, there's gotta be something. There's gotta be a new gimmick. And maybe there's the gimmick of mouse mode, but, it's a gimmick. It's not really a thing. And ultimately, that didn't matter for me. Because something that I felt in the final years of the Nintendo Switch 1 was that all things being equal, I wouldn't purchase games on the Nintendo Switch One because they would perform and they would look horrible compared to what I would get on a Steam Deck.
Right.
And so I'll save for a few Nintendo exclusives my Nintendo Switch One in its final years, and save, I guess, for Tears of the Kingdom. It started gathering dust more and more. Also because I didn't really like Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and so I essentially only played Tears of the Kingdom in the final year and a half of the Switch One. And so the Switch 2 came with a lot of promise for me, and most of its promise has been fulfilled. But there's a couple of things that made me realize it should be my number one. And the first one is not having to worry about performance anymore. The fact that I can play with my Nintendo Switch 2 at my desk, and I really care about my setup because I invested a lot of money and a lot of time into creating nice spaces for me this year. And so being able to just sit down and dock my Nintendo Switch 2 and say, I want to play at 4K 60, and it's going to be fine. And the fact that I can do it, and that I can also do it in the living room, and create this beautiful environment for me to play games with great graphics and good performance, I really didn't think that Nintendo could pull it off. And they did.
Yeah.
And so that was the first item. And the second one, just the fact that I finally got a Metroid game this year. And I know that it's not a perfect Metroid Prime game, but it's a Metroid Prime game for me. And, you know, there are two, you know, if I were to think of my life playing video games as a gaming career, so to speak, but there are a few pivotal moments in that career, and there are a few moments frozen in time, both of which are related to Metroid. The first one is finishing Super Metroid on a PSP using SNES NEX when I was, I don't know, 13, 14 or something.
Yeah.
And the other one was the first time I booted up Metroid Prime 1 on the GameCube in 2002. And how unreal it felt. And so the fact that this year I can play a Metroid Prime game on my Nintendo Switch 2 at 4K 60 on my monitor or in the living room, you know, with my fancy new TV, it makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. In a way that I couldn't possibly not pick the Nintendo Switch 2 as my handheld of the year. And that's this, you know, not to mention Mario Kart World or playing Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom in 4K, or, you know, just playing Donkey Kong Bonanza, or where is it? Oh, it's not here anymore. I was gonna grab my GameCube controller, Wind Waker, as a GameCube classic on the Nintendo Switch 2.
Yeah.
So it's like a perfect storm of what I was hoping the Nintendo Switch 2 was gonna be, the games that I was hoping I was going to be able to play in its first year, and it exceeded my expectations. And so for all those reasons, the Switch 2 is my number one.
Very nice. Very nice.
But we are going to collectively pick a handheld of the year for the show. And let me say this, I would happily pick the AM Thor, since it's both of you guys' first choice.
Yeah, I think it's, I mean...
And it's
John,
also maybe the most representative of the show and sort of the arc of our conversations this year.
It is.
I think that's true. John, you mentioned this. It was tough for you to pick the Thor or the Switch 2 as number one. And the same for me.
Yeah.
I think Federico, you'll probably be the most like correct objectively long term. You know, if you come back and listen to this episode in 5 years, I think your pick probably has the longest legs to it. But when I think about 2025 for handhelds, the Thor feels so indicative of like every trend, right?
Yes.
We're getting the clamshells of it all. We're getting the
OLED,
the OLED of it all. We're getting the Steam connection of it all. Like, it just feels the most like 2025 trends wrapped up into one little thing. Yeah. So is it the Thor then?
I think so.
I think it's the Thor. I think
it's the Thor.
I think the NPC handheld of the year is the AM Thor.
Congratulations, Anne.
Well,
We'll send you a Waluigi amiibo.
nice.
I'll put this in the mail and I'll send it to AYN headquarters with no context and see what happens.
Perfect. See if they figure out. Oh, this is Brendon Bigley.
Yeah, the
here's
FBI
what
is
we're-
going to show up at my house.
Here's what we're gonna do. These are our handles of the year. In NPC XL, we are going to do a quick recap of 2025 and look ahead at 2026. How about that, guys?
Sounds
Can we
good
also
to
talk
me.
honorable mentions? I would love to do that in XL.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, let's do
Okay.
it.
I think
Well-
we all have a bunch of handhelds we didn't mention. So
Yeah.
That's true.
This was our final episode of the year. Am I correct?
Yes, you
Did
are
I get
correct.
the schedule right? Okay.
You got
well,
the schedule right.
thank you all from the three of us. It's been a really fun year and weird and great in the best possible ways.
Yep.
And I think next year is gonna be even stranger, especially because it's impossible to buy RAM anymore. So what is gonna happen?
yeah.
Yeah, tune
Oh my
into
God.
XL for more on
It's worth
that.
mentioning. This is our first full year of doing the show since we
Yeah, it
started.
is. It
also.
is first full calendar year. Yeah, we
Yeah.
started mid-year the year before.
Yeah, we still like each other.
Yeah,
so
we're still going
good
strong.
job.
Isn't that
Good
isn't that
job.
great?
That's nice.
Just a huge thank you to you three and a huge thank you to the listeners. You two, I guess. I'm
You can thank
pointing at
yourself.
myself, I
It's all
guess.
right.
I'll thank myself. Why not? Self-love is important.
Yes.
A huge thank you to all of you who
Yes.
listen to the show and talk about it every
Absolutely.
week and reach out with ideas and handheld recommendations and all that stuff. It really means the world to all of us that there's a little community forming around this. It's really cool. So really, thank you. It's great.
Thank you. Yes.
Thanks,
Take it easy.
everybody.
Play some games, and we'll see you in 2026.
Yeah, we will be back, and I guess it's like 2 to 3 weeks at this point. But yeah, we'll be back in early January. And in the meantime, I'm sure Brendon will still be posting and doing videos. So go over to
I
Wave.
have a lot of stuff that needs to come out soon.
I figured you did. So go over to Wavelength Stat Online to find him there. Federico and I are going to be taking a little time off, so it'll be a little quiet over at MacStories.net. But you can still find us there, and our other shows are taking a break as well. But we'll be back, as I said, in a few weeks. And in the meantime, you can catch up with us on social media. Just search for our names there. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.